When you were comparing Star Wars and Star Trek, there's a lot of different ways that you can compartmentalize those and, a lot of different angles that you could hit those franchises with. In today's video, we are going to compare the original 6 George Lucas Star Wars movies versus the original 6 Star Trek movies with the original cast, and finally decide which one is better. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Welcome back to Echo Base Network. Today we are breaking down the original 6 George Lucas Star Wars movies, and we're going to see how those compare head-to-head against the 6 Gene Roddenberry original Star Trek movies that started in 1979, the ones with the incredible cast, Shatner, Nimoy, it just goes on and on. Great movies. We all know that Star Wars is great, right? So anyways, we're going to compare those franchises, those film franchises, and kind of say, on the whole, which one is better. And the way that we're going to do it, we're going to go start with the original movie, and we're going to go movie for movie. And as they were released in order, beginning in 1977 and 1979 for each franchise, how do they stack up against each other? And then when we're all done, we'll be able to take a step back, look at it, and say, I think this one is better, and here's why. Let's get into it. Well, first and foremost, one of the greatest movies of all time, if not the greatest movie of all time, Star Wars. 1977, now known as A New Hope. For us OG Star Wars fans, we'll always call it Star Wars. When you say Star Wars, this is what I think about. Or the franchise as a whole, I guess. But anyways, this is the movie that was the first modern-day blockbuster. This is the movie that helped make entertainment what it is today. Without this, where would we be? This is Luke Skywalker. This is Han Solo, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, X-Wings, TIE Fighters, the Millennium Falcon, the Force. Great characters, great action. The movie literally had it all. Droids. Look at the clips here from the original trailer. You just cannot beat this movie. We're starting with a home run for George Lucas and Star Wars. We all know that George Lucas had an incredible team behind him in making this film. He did not do it by himself, but it is what it is. It was his vision, and man, this is just cinematic gold. This is the barometer. This is the measuring stick. This is where we begin. And the interesting thing there is that came out of nowhere. Nobody expected it because Star Wars hadn't been around before. That is what began the whole thing. That's not the case for the competition here. Star Trek, the original series, came out way before the movie in 1979. Trek fans were starving for new Star Trek, and here they come with their debut film in 1979, Star Trek, the motion picture. The movie had a little bit different feel to it. Some people didn't like the story. They didn't think that it was directed very well. Even some of the actors have taken shots over the years about the direction of the film. It kind of got off to a bad start. However, that being said, Star Trek was back, and it did lay a foundation. Now, saying all of that, I will say, I love this movie. I think it is a great way to begin what we got as we go through each movie by movie. The cast was back. Spock shows up. The banter back and forth, getting to know each other again. I've not seen you in so long. Shatner's Kirk is taking over the ship. He's back in the captain's seat. He's got that fascination with, wanting to captain the ship, the Enterprise, and be the hero, the savior. That's what he should be doing, even though he has taken the position of admiral and is no longer the captain of a ship. So that's pretty neat seeing all that play out. The crew being excited that Kirk is there. Even when Uhura said the chances of our survival just doubled when Kirk shows up to take over. I love the entire opening scene where Kirk and Scotty are flying on the shuttle to the new Enterprise and seeing it and just playing the music. It was a really good beginning to the franchise. However, if you're going to stack them up head to head, you've got the 1977 Star Wars release versus the 1979 Star Trek The Motion Picture. There's no comparison. Star Trek loses this one by miles. Star Wars obliterates Star Trek when you're going head to head right here. What would Star Wars not obliterate? Very little. Maybe the Fellowship of the Ring comes across my mind in terms of trilogies. But yeah, it's Star Wars here, hands down. But now we move down, and honestly, this is the ultimate showdown between the two franchises. 1980s Empire Strikes Back. You know, the one where everything goes bad. Everything goes wrong. The Empire is kicking the rebellion's butt. They're running across the galaxy, trying to hide from the Empire. Everything's going bad. Look what happens to Han Solo. He gets tracked down by Darth Vader. Luke gets his hand cut off. We get the big reveal, arguably the greatest moment in cinematic history, where Vader tells Luke that he is his father. So much is going on here. You got Yoda, you got the Force, you got a great opening war on Hoth, which, you know, normally that would be like the last act. Not in this movie. They start with that. You get the asteroid field and the escape from the Star Destroyers. It is just an incredible film. And for the bulk of, majority of Star Wars fans, The Empire Strikes Back is the greatest. It's better than the original. It's better than what we call A New Hope. I would agree with that. I think The Empire Strikes Back is the greatest movie ever made. Directed by Irvin Kershner, which I thought was a brilliant move by Lucas because he's a better director. And you see that. You get the payoff there in this movie. What an incredible movie. And this is the measuring stick. This is the barometer. I know I just said that with 1977 Star Wars, but no, that's not the case. It's The Empire Strikes Back for the majority of fans. But you cannot forget about Star Trek II, which also most Star Trek fans would say this is the best movie. This is cinematic gold. This is the best in the franchise. And it is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Khan is back from the original series, played by Ricardo Montalban. Khan is probably the greatest villain in Star Trek history now as we look back. Definitely one of them, especially in terms of the original cast. The way that they tied that together was brilliant. And very similar to The Empire Strikes Back, everything's going bad. It looks like there's no hope. Well, that's the genius of Kirk. Kirk's able to show that he has his plan. He's not going to fall to a no-win situation. There's always a way out and a way to win. Such a great movie. And if you compare the two, Wrath of Khan versus Empire Strikes Back, it could go either way. And you got to recognize that you're biased in this situation if you're more of a Star Wars fan like myself. Even though I do love Star Trek as well, I have to give the nod here to The Empire Strikes Back. I think it's the greatest movie of all time, but Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is a gold standard, without a doubt. And if you go The Wrath of Khan, I don't fault you for that. For many people, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, would be a step down. Now, for my generation, I was 4 years old when Jedi came out. Ewoks didn't bother me. I loved the Jabba the Hutt scene. You got Princess Leia and all of that. Great movie. I love the ending. It's got perhaps the greatest space battle in any movie ever at the end of Return of the Jedi with the battle for Endor. We get to see the ultimate payoff of Luke becoming a Jedi Knight and being able to have that kind of power. You got the speeder bike race on Endor. Just so much happening there. You get the love relationship between Han Solo and Princess Leia, Boba Fett, and what happens there. So much happening in this film, and it's a great send-off. This is it. This is the end of the original trilogy, and we didn't really know in 1983 if we were actually going to be getting the continuation of this story. This was the end. And if you compare Return of the Jedi 1983 to the third Star Trek film Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, left fans with a bitter taste in their mouth with the death of Spock. I mean, Leonard Nimoy's Spock has that emotional death scene at the end of The Wrath of Khan where he saves the ship. And now, I mean, you knew he was coming back. They let you know in the credits. But now Star Trek is bringing back fan favorite Leonard Nimoy's Spock. And that's a big payoff for a lot of Star Trek fans. Is the movie Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, is it as good as The Wrath of Khan? No. But the same can be said for Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back. I don't know really anybody that says Return of the Jedi is a better film than The Empire Strikes Back. I'm sure there are people out there, but you would be in a minority by far, which that doesn't matter. It's your opinion. We respect it. But Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, escaping with the Enterprise, even though it has been, damaged, going on mission to save your friend, going against the logic, the good of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Screw that. We're throwing that out. Kirk's going to do what Kirk believes must be done, win, lose, or draw. And I respect that. So when these two films go head to head, it's a little closer. For the first time in comparing the movies, this one is a little bit closer for me, even though I'm obviously going to still give Star Wars the nod. Return of the Jedi gets the win over Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, but it's a little bit more narrow of a margin than what we've gotten before. So now this is where things really start to get shaken up, and I got to identify my own personal bias here as well. In 1999, Star Wars, after a 16-year break from being on the big screen, Star Wars returns, and it's The Phantom Menace. 1999's The Phantom Menace, starring Jake Lloyd, Ahmad Best, Natalie Portman. George Lucas is back. Star Wars is back. For many fans, it's the first time they were able to go see Star Wars in a movie theater, which is special in and of itself. But something felt a little different about this movie. There were a lot of Star Wars fans like myself. I was, 19 when the movie came out. And I was so pumped and excited to see Star Wars return to the theater, but it had a much different feel to it. It has so much CGI. It didn't look or feel the same. There's way more going on in terms of government and trade federation and all of these things. And it's like, what is going on? And then there's the whole slapstick humor part of it that was way more over the top than what I felt we got in the original trilogy. Jar Jar Binks is nothing compared to C-3PO and the banter we get with the droids in the original trilogy. This was over the top. This was, with the fart jokes and all that stuff, just totally different. Now, I had some positives, for the pod race scene for a lot of fans, Darth Maul at the end, Duel of the Fates, you got young Obi-Wan Kenobi, really great lightsaber combat fight. There's no doubt about that. It definitely has an appeal. Now, for most fans, though, it's going to be a big step down. It's going to be a big step down going from the original trilogy to the prequels with The Phantom Menace. Now, not with everybody. There's a lot of people that hold this sacred, but for me, when you compare Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace to 1986's Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Star Trek absolutely blows Star Wars out of the water. I think it's a bigger margin of victory for Star Trek here than when you compare the first movies against each other. And that one, I think, is a pretty wide margin. 1977 Star Wars is clearly better than Star Trek The Motion Picture. But here, going around this time, Star Wars Episode 1, 1999's The Phantom Menace, is nowhere near as good of a film as 1986's Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Captain There Be Whales here. They go back in time. You get the scene with Spock on the bus with the little punk rock guy, the humpback whales. I mean, the cast is so funny. Chekhov thinks he's an admiral. The list of great moments in this film go on and on and on. And once again, Kirk and the crew saves all of Earth. They save everybody. Everything is bleak. They're going to lose. Things are not looking good with this alien probe coming in with the language. They figure out the solution. Despite the obstacles, they overcome it. And this movie is just so good. Now, I don't know why we're getting this ad here for non-Star Trek. This should be showing Voyage Home clips, but it is not. But you know how great Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home is. In my opinion, this is peak Star Trek on the big screen. It never got better than this right here for me. I know a lot of people would say The Wrath of Khan is better. I have to say Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home is my favorite of all of them. And it's so good, it's timeless. It will never age poorly. Even when they go back to 1986 San Francisco, it will never age poorly. Great film. And now you have the fifth battle here, the fifth movie with George Lucas in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. For many fans, this is the low point. Now, I would say The Phantom Menace is the low point. I think Attack of the Clones is a far superior film. However, it's still not all that good. I mean, still, we're not really feeling like Star Wars a whole lot to me. And a lot of people share that sentiment. Are there some great moments? Absolutely. I'll never forget on opening night when Yoda pulls that lightsaber out, when he used the Force to bring the saber to his hand and he ignites it. It was pandemonium in the sold-out theater. Star Wars was still a major draw at the time, even though The Phantom Menace was, not received all that well. Attack of the Clones was doing perfectly fine. It did have some great moments, some more good lightsaber fights. It's pushing the story forward with Anakin. We get to see Hayden Christensen as Anakin for the first time. You get the scene where he goes back to Tatooine and Shmi's there. Shmi dies. I got to say, as much as, I'm not crazy about the film, that's a great moment. When she dies and he has his meltdown and he kills all the Tuskens and then he reveals that to Padme, that's really good stuff. Seeing all the Jedi engage in battle on Geonosis, that's good stuff. Count Dooku, anything with Christopher Lee in it, that's good stuff. So the movie is a lot better, I think, than what most people would say. However, when you compare it to Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, who's winning that? I mean, you're still getting the original cast. Now, I will say this. I think, in my own opinion, I think that Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, is the lesser of all Trek movies with the original cast. I think I'm going to say it's the worst one. However, there are still some iconic scenes when Kirk looked at the alien and says, "What does God need with the starship?" Well, don't you know? Aren't you God? I mean, we're talking about some iconic moments, and those moments are better to me than anything that we got in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. When you take these two and you go head to head, I'm going to say it's a push. It could go either way. Let me know in the comments what you think. Which one are you picking? But the margin is so small here between the two films. It's a push, so it could go either way. Now, this one is where I'm going to throw some people off. Revenge of the Sith is a really good Star Wars film, especially the final 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe the last hour of the film, where everything starts to go bad. Execute Order 66 goes down. Everything is, you're seeing the Jedi get wiped out. Anakin truly turns to the dark side. You get to see him as Darth Vader. He takes that beat down from Obi-Wan that everyone knew was coming and we were anticipating getting to see that. And then there's the whole Luke and Leia reveal. They go their separate ways as the twins. You see the death of Padme. All of that happens. You get the iconic showdown between Palpatine, the Emperor, and Yoda. All of that was really, really good. It is the best Star Wars movie in the prequel trilogy. Easy. It is so much better than Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, or Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. But how does it stand up against the final Star Trek movie from the original cast? Star Trek Episode 6, The Undiscovered Country, came out in 1991. This one was also a little bit different of a flavor for people. You had basically a murder conspiracy mystery going on, and Spock is going to intervene. You get the conflict between Kirk and Spock, taking them on this mission. But there's a huge message here. You have to do the right thing, even if it's for the people that you despise. In Kirk's case, it's the Klingons. He hates the Klingons. He hates them for what they did, the murder of his son David, everything that has happened, but he still does the right thing and basically makes the Federation and everybody in the galaxy better. Great movie. I just don't even know. Sulu as a captain and the way that they were able to defeat the renegade Klingons and foil their plans. So taking this movie and going head-to-head against Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, this one I also would say is probably a push, but I might lean towards Star Trek Episode 6. And that really does speak to the decline overall for someone in my generation, most of us. When you take the original series and you move into the prequel era, it's just different. Now, as a quick caveat, I will say, I will give him his flowers. There's a lot about Dave Filoni I'm not crazy about and I don't like. And he's not made a good live-action series yet to me. However, the work that he did with George on the Clone Wars cartoon series did have an incredible residual impact on the prequel movies. After I watched the Clone Wars first 5 seasons, I went back for the first time to revisit the prequels, and I looked at them completely different, with a different lens, because the Clone Wars series was still fresh in my mind, and they were so much better. And I don't know if Filoni and George even knew that they were doing that. But what they created made a positive impact on the prequels. So if you have not experienced that, I would say give that a try. Go watch the Clone Wars and then go back and watch the prequels. But let's get back to this judgment here. When you go just the original trilogy for Star Wars, there's nothing that compares to it. The Lord of the Rings is close. The Godfather maybe close. I don't know. But nothing's beating it. Nothing's beating it for me. So when you go just right there, it's a clear win for Star Wars above everything else. The problem is when you continue. And that is where I think that Star Trek gains a lot of ground. I would say from beginning to finish, Star Trek was way more consistent with its storytelling, with its production, with the acting and the cast, and they were way more consistent in terms of giving a good product to the fans. And I don't remember Star Trek fans up in arms, angry and upset. And Star Wars fans, we're still arguing about the prequel trilogy. You know, prequel lovers really get defensive and they get really upset, kind of like all those EU fanatics. There's a lot of EU fanatics. If you say anything about a book, they're coming after you. They want to burn you at the stake. You know, it's ridiculous how fandom can get. Well, Star Trek never really had that in the 80s. It might have gotten off to a rocky start with the motion picture, but it was consistently good. And Star Trek fans remained pretty happy. Star Wars fans, on the other hand, there was a huge drop-off. And that drop-off is still around today. It's still going on today. Star Wars we've got negative momentum happening right now. Star Wars needs a lot of wins. And we're not getting those wins. But when you look at the first 6 George Lucas films versus the first 6 Star Trek films, all 6 Star Trek films with the original cast, I am going to say from beginning to end, because of the drop-off with the prequels, that Star Trek is more consistently good. I'm going to give Star Trek the nod when you go 1 through 6. Again, if you go 1 through 3, we're not even debating it. Even though the Wrath of Khan was what it was. Great. There's no comparison. So what do you think about this ranking? What do you think about my judgment? How do you see it? How do you judge it? And there's one more thing that I want to bring up here. Our friend Steve is a big Star Trek fan, and he has been encouraging me for a few years now to complete Deep Space Nine. I have not completed Deep Space Nine, but it is definitely on my to-do list. So Steve says here in a comment, "Hi Coach, what do you think is better, Star Wars prequels 1 to 3 or the 4 Star Trek Next Generation movies? I'm a Trek fan, but the Next Generation crew couldn't make it work on the big screen. First Contact is the only Next Generation movie that is good from start to finish, and I don't know if you've noticed that all the Next Generation movies are focused on Data. Love the show. Cheers, Steve. Deep Space Nine, #1. Well, thank you, Steve, for posting that, and that is a great idea for a video for another time. That is, I'm going to have to think about that one and plan that one out, but I love that suggestion, and keep those suggestions coming. Just want to say thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know in the comments, Star Trek versus Star Wars, all 6 original movies. As we always say here, you are Echo Base Network. May the Force be with you, and live long and prosper. See you guys on the next one.